Hey, Tuesday evening, so we're talking about ministry with young people. For those who may not know, my name is Richard Moores. I'm the Children's, Youth and Families Pastor for Southside Uniting Church. Probably guess know where Southside is because you're probably watching this on the Southside Facebook group. Thanks for joining us. It's great to have you as always. As we begin, I want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land. For us at Southside, the Yagara and the Turrbal people. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. We pray for reconciliation between all them, us, all peoples, and we continue to pray that we will learn from them about how to care for the land as they have done. As always, I'm not alone here. I've got my little buddy. Here he is. Hello everybody! Hey Grover, how are you? I'm pretty good. I've been using my collection today. I saw your collection. Everyone will get to see your collection on the video tomorrow. Oh, yeah, they are. I hope you like my collection and feel free to add to it. Yeah. Did you get to show David Fender? He wasn't in the office. You didn't get to show David Fender your... Oh dear. Hopefully he'll see the video and get to see your collection. It's not the same as the real thing. Well, it's probably not the same as seeing it in real life, but that's all right. So if you're wondering what Grover's collection is, you'll have to watch the video tomorrow. Should we tell them? No. So watch the video tomorrow. As always, if you've got any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat and hopefully we'll see them and Grover will read them out. Yeah. There's none there. No, there's none there at the moment, Grover. So Grover helps us by reading out the chats, but Grover, you can pop away for a minute. So I thought what we might start to look at over the next few weeks is the book I'm reading at the moment, because that's what we do. Called Rebooted, Reclaiming Youth Ministry for the Long Haul, a Biblical Framework. Sorry, my finger was in the way. So the author of this looks at the models that tend to be seen in youth ministry. And he suggests that there's 4 key ones. There's the incarnational model where the youth leader becomes that incarnational person of Christ and tries to build relationships with people so they might come to understand who Christ is. He suggests that that can lead to the place where we lose some of the Jesus thing and it becomes more about the leader. So he sees problems in that. There's the funnel model where we take kids in from the big group and take them into Bible study and take them and funnel them down into deeper and deeper knowledge, which is great, but where do the kids who aren't necessarily don't fit in the funnel, where do they come? He looks at the worship model that is around worship at a level for young people and teenagers, and where that's the key part. Find some issues with that. He also has intergenerational, which you're going, yay! He suggests that intergenerational struggles because it wants to break everything into intergenerational and there needs to be groups for age-appropriate stuff. As you know, from what we've been saying, intergenerational wants to say, yes, there's space and time for age-appropriate stuff. So we're not getting rid of that totally. So just question his understanding of that. But you often find that with speakers. And this is why it's interesting to read books. And it's interesting, having read this book, I was part of a session earlier in the year of the International Institute of Youth Ministry Studies or something like that. Completely got the wrong thing. And one of the people presenting a paper was, pulling apart and going against the incarnational model, saying, we need to have Jesus in there, and saying that Andrew Roots really pushes for a intergenerational model that means that, Jesus, you become Jesus to the kids. And I thought, that's not really what Andrew would say, I don't think. And it's been interesting. In this book, he mentions that that is a path that intergenerational, incarnational models can go down, but that Andrew Root nicely puts it in a way that's better framed. So it's interesting to read different authors and go, I think you're attacking someone that I like because you don't fully understand where they're coming from. Found that with Dan Carson's book about emerging church that it's like, well, you're attacking something that I don't think is necessarily what McLaren and others are saying. But that's by the by. Anyway, back to what we're meant to be talking about. So he says out of those 4 models, there are different things that we can get. And he works through it by working through the different parts of the Bible. So we're going to do that over the next few weeks. So we're starting with the Pentateuch. There's a big word for you if you don't know what the Pentateuch is. The Pentateuch is the first 5 books of the Bible. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers. It's called the Pentateuch. Penti being 5. And so he says, out of that we get teach everything, which is the title of this talk. We were wondering where that was going to come in. Teach everything. Now, anyone who's been watching me long enough knows exactly where we're going to start off with. Deuteronomy chapter 6. So now this is the commandment, the statutes and the ordinances that the Lord your God charged me to teach you to observe in the land that you are about to cross into and occupy, so that you and your children and your children's children may fear the Lord your God all the days of your life, and keep all his decrees and his commandments, that I am commanding you, so that your days may be long. Hear therefore, O Israel, and observe them diligently, so that it may go well with you, and so that you may multiply greatly in a land flowing with milk and honey, as the Lord, the God of your ancestors, has promised you. Here we go. Particularly, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might. Keep these words that I am commanding you today in your heart. Recite them to your children, and talk about them when you are at home and when you are away. Bind them as a sign on your head. Fix them as an emblem on your forehead, and write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. So since we're told to have this message about God, these laws of God, this knowledge about God surrounding us, that we're talking with our young people and sharing that message. An important part is, how do we share that message with our young people and keep them understanding what it means to have faith, what it means to be following Jesus and to be following God. And we surround ourselves, we have it on our foreheads, on our wrists, we write it on the doorposts, that we just surround our young people with the story. And so how do we do that in church? And that's why one of the reasons why churches used to have stained glass windows. When you had a group of people who were fairly illiterate, how do you keep reminding them the stories of God? You put them in picture form around the building. And so stained glass windows told the stories of the faith that we wanted people to learn. How do we do that today? How do we share? How do we decorate our spaces so that sharing that message, and so that that message is coming through clearly? Whether that's stuff that we put up that is permanently there, that continues to tell the same story, or whether we're continuing to refresh that and go, okay, well, this month we're redoing this and we're putting some new things up. What might this look like? And so we want to be surrounding our young people. So how are we inputting devotions into our groups? So that teaching stuff in Jaffa is really important. The devotions parts in brigades is really important. The fact that the Jaffa craft, the brigades craft, often revolves around some sort of Bible verse, that's crucial. You know, yes, it's using different teaching styles for the kids to learn. You know, your kinesthetic will learn through making and doing. But it's also surrounding them with that message. That if the lucky families get to bring home all that craft, it surrounds their children with those stories that we've looked at in Jaffa. Aren't we lucky parents? I think Jonah's whale might have just got off the dining table. Might still be there, if we're lucky. So that sense of how are we as people of faith continuing to surround ourselves and surround our young people, where we're have those opportunities to share those stories. And so, being surrounded raises those questions. Well, why do we have that picture there? What's that tell us about Mum and Dad? Why do you wear the cross? Or why do we have the picture of Jesus on the wall? Or whatever it is. Those things raise questions and allow us to teach. The important part of the Passover meal is that the youngest child is there asking questions. Well, why do we celebrate this? What's the flatbread about? What's the lamb about? And we want to have these opportunities and have things around which will raise these opportunities for young people to be asking questions. What in the modern educational things talk about educational moments, where there are things around that will lead kids to ask questions, teachable moments. Educational wasn't right. Teachable moments. So there's things around that will make kids ask questions, and when they're asking questions, they're interested and they want to know, as opposed to now's our time to sit down and talk about Jesus. So we surround them with things. In the book, Tim Gough, should have probably said Tim's our guy we're following, says, have you ever noticed that becoming a believer is a much less central idea throughout the Old Testament? You don't find many conversion stories in the first books. Instead, the expectation is that a young person would grow into one naturally during the routine course of development because of the authentic reach of real healthy saturation. So they're just surrounded with it. We're not hoping that, as a teenager they will convert and become a follower of God in the Old Testament, because it's just part of their life. We go to worship, we go to sacrifice. We do all these things because God is part of our life. And because we do all these things, we surround all our things, our children grow up in the faith. And so how do we continue to do that? And perhaps as we've drawn away from that and we haven't saturated with them, is that part of the reason why they aren't growing up in the faith as much? Who knows? Just got to check my time. I realise I have no idea what the time is. So he talks about saturation. He also talks about sanctification, that in part that children are part of worship, and parents are worship leaders and they worship with their children. He uses the story of Abraham taking Isaac to be sacrificed. Not the most fun story. A very challenging story for us. But it raises that question of Abraham goes with Isaac and he knows, hang on, where's the ram? We need the ram if we're going to sacrifice. This is how we do worship. And they go after worship and they take the things and there's no question, what are we doing, Dad? Obviously, Isaac has been involved in worship enough that he knows what's going on. He knows that there's something wrong. The other and much nicer example he uses is Moses and Joshua. And he raises the question, did Joshua go up the mountain when Moses went to get the 10 Commandments? And so, he turns to Exodus 24. And I'll just turn there. So after they've heard the 10 Commandments from God, we're told in verse 13, so Moses set out with his assistant Joshua, and Moses went up the mountain of God. To the elders he said, wait here for us until we come to you again, for Aaron and Hur are with you. Whoever has a dispute may go to them. So there's this sense of, Joshua's with Moses. We then read in verse 15, then Moses went up on the mountain, and the cloud covered the mountain. The glory of the Lord settled on Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it for 6 days. On the 7th day, he called to Moses out of the cloud. Now the appearance of the glory of the Lord was like devouring fire on the top of the mountain, in the sight of the people of Israel. Moses entered the cloud and went up on the mountain. Moses was on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. Now, he of course raises the question, well, okay, if Moses goes up alone, well, what's happened to Joshua? Because Joshua went off with him partway up the mountain. He left the elders. Moses just left him halfway up the mountain? Did he get parental permission for that? You know, was that all right? Or did he go further with him? Then he jumps over to chapter 32, when Moses is coming back down the mountain, having spent all that time up with God. And we're told in verse 15, then Moses turned and went down from the mountain carrying the 2 tablets of the covenant in his hands, tablets that were written on both sides, written on the front and on the back. The tablets were the work of God, and the writing was writing of God, engraved upon the tablets. When Joshua heard the noise of the people as they shouted, he said to Moses, so again, Joshua is with Moses. Has he picked him up along the way? He's 40 days by himself. Pick him up. Or has Joshua been up there the whole time? And in that sense, what does that say about us and our young people? Are we taking them into worship? Are we taking them to places where we meet God and helping them to meet God? And so it's that sense of we teach them, we surround them with the message, we take them to places where they will meet God and come face to face with God. And so he says what we need to do is teach everything. We need to pass. So P stands for prepare. Prepare your list of basics that each young person should know about God and relating to him each term. Have a teaching goals plan and don't make it up as you go along, or stick to your interests. So first challenge is we need to know, what do we want our young people to learn along their journey? And how do we make sure we do that? So we've talked in the past that that's one of the goals and things that we're looking at this year, and sort of bounced out of my workload with Fun in the Sunday, but we'll bounce it back in. How do we come up with my thinking 6-year curriculum that will rotate through and keep going on, but are the key things that we want our young people to learn? I've sort of had it all worked out and then changed my mind. I thought, what if, 1 year we spent a year through the Bible, a year we spent, or 2 years we went years through the Gospels, and then the other years through the epistles, Old Testament, things like that, and themes. So, got to get around to rejigging it all, but that's the thing. How do we come up with this curriculum that we know is going to teach our young people what they need to know, as opposed to just hoping that they will pick it up? And that means if we've got a set curriculum, we can get it across the groups. So at the moment, because of the nature of the groups, Jaffa's doing their own thing. Brigades are doing their own thing. Sunday morning groups are doing their own thing. How do we tie it all together so that everyone's hearing the same message? So that families are hearing it at different levels and that they can have these wonderful good discussions. Well, what did you hear? And what did you hear? And what did you hear? We can share those. Teachable moments become more open to them. So P, prepare. A, all the faith community will need marshalling, including parents, pastors, elders, the coffee bar team, the janitor, the youth leaders, to make this a reality. Don't try to do it all on your own. So if we're going to surround them with this message of God, then we need everybody to be surrounding them with this message. We need everybody on board. So again, youth ministry, children's ministry is not about, hey, we've paid Richard, stand back, we've got it all. Or we've got a few youth leaders. We want the whole church to be involved in the bringing up of our young people and helping them to understand what faith is about. Without the whole church, it's never going to work. And so we need everybody on board to be sharing their faith, to be living out their faith. And that's why if we've got this curriculum and we're all doing it, even Sunday morning in our normal services, hey, isn't it great? We can all share these discussion points. So we're going to prepare. We have all the faith community involved. S, saturate. Saturate your young people in these basics by developing a community that demonstrates and explores them continually. Don't limit teaching to the God slot. So how, in all that we're doing, are we teaching these things? So that the games that we play in Jaffa, Youth Group, Boys Brigade, they build on what we've been learning about. The activities we do, the crafts that we do, all these things work together to build up and surround them with this story. And let me say, Stephanie does a wonderful job of fitting our crafts with what we're teaching in Jaffa. Back when I used to run Kids Club in Belmont, the craft was whatever was going cheap at the reject shop that week. Whatever I thought I could get the kids to do. Stephanie, the craft always ties in with what we're teaching. And that's key. How are we doing that? How are we saturating them? Surrounding them with these stories. Surrounding them, and everything they do with us in that week is telling that one unified story. So that if you go to church or watch church online on Sunday, if you do the family faith stuff during the week, if you watch the online video, if you go to Jaffa, if you go to Brigades, if you go to Unite, you will hear the one story. We are not there. But if we can get there, hey, how wonderful that will be. So we're going to prepare, we're going to have all the faith community, we're going to saturate, and we're going to sanctify. Sanctify your young people, or allow God to, by inviting them to participate in times of experimental, real communal and personal worship. Don't limit worship to annual camp or altar calls. So we need to be involving our young people in worship, allowing them to experiment, which means it might not always be what we want. And it might not always go perfect. But you know what? The truth is, when we, as trained ministry agents, lead worship, it doesn't always go perfect. Sometimes we mess up. And you let us get away with it. So why don't we let our young people get away with it? So we need to be encouraging them to be part of worship and be involving them. We need to allow them space to explore. We need to walk beside them and to help them. So we'll obviously return to worship type stuff later in the book. But it's important for us to help them to grow in their ability to worship, their ability to find space to be with God. And so he finishes each chapter with some questions. So let me encourage you to ponder these questions about our ministry with young people in Southside, or if you're from somewhere else, wherever you are. Here's some questions for you to ponder. To what extent does your youth work, or children's work, facilitate and marshal the whole church to pass on the truth of God through saturation and sanctification? How does your ministry with young people facilitate the whole church to pass on the truth of God through saturation and sanctification? You know our thinking on that one. It's no surprise. We want intergenerational. We want to be doing this where the whole church is involved and sharing that faith. But we need to ask this question. At the moment, not terribly great. We need to work on it. We need to change that culture. Question 2. Does your church culture take responsibility for impressing God's word into the lives of young people? Or does it delegate this to the youth worker? How could you gently introduce more of a balance? So who are the people who are sharing the story of God with our young people? Is it just me, the youth leaders, the brigades leaders? Or is it others finding time on Sunday morning? Is it others? And here's one for you. Is it you saying, I actually have this faith story, and I'm going to tell Richard, and we'll see which groups I can come and tell this faith story, this experience I've had of God, this way I've learned about who God is. You don't have to come every week, but once, I'm going to come to Unite, I'll come into Jaffa, and I'll come to Brigades, and I'll share this story. Again, working with your children doesn't mean you need to be doing it every day, every week. But we need everyone to be involved in some way. Maybe just once. Question 3. With children raised by the church, should we assume a growing relationship with God or expect a conversion moment? So often we focused on, we need this conversion moment. And he would agree there's nothing necessarily wrong with an altar call. But that's not the only way people come to faith. Some people just grow up in the faith, grow up in the church, they've been saturated with it, and they're just Christians. And there's no point where they go, yes, I made a decision, but they know that this is their faith. That they are Christians. They didn't pray the sinner's prayer at any one point necessarily, but they've grown up into it. So are we looking for how are we leading our kids up to grow up into a relationship? Or are we going, how do we have moments where you will convert? So we need to think about that one. Raises a question. Fourth question, there are 4 questions. How can you make your own personal worship of and reflection on God to be a higher priority? Are you tuned into his voice? So how are you worshipping God? Because if we're going to take young people along for the ride and help them to worship God, we need to worship God. How are we doing? How is your faith journey? How's your worship journey? How's it been through COVID? Have you continued to worship regularly, or have you pulled back? As we go back, are you going in person or are you going online? And it doesn't matter how you're doing the worship, but are you finding spaces where you can worship? And if those places aren't the places which help you to worship, how are you finding the places that do? Do you have spiritual practices? You try some of the spiritual disciplines that help you to explore who God is and discover who God is. And then how do you share those with the young people? Again, hey, do you say, hey, I love this spiritual practice, and Richard, I want to come and teach Unite how to do centering prayer, or how to walk a labyrinth, or whatever. And that way, share our faith. And so first, we need to be teaching everything. We need to be continually sharing our faith journey, helping the young people to understand who this God is that we follow, and wanting them to understand more. So that's key for us at Southside. That's not going to be new to you. You've heard me use the Deuteronomy passage numerous times. But it's key for us to be passing that on. It's key for us to be learning. Richard. Yes, David Fender says we can't pass on what we don't have ourselves. Exactly. We need to be experiencing God. We need to be understanding God. We need to be excited about God in order to be excited about sharing with others. So we need to be learning more about who this God is that we follow. We need to be doing the worship stuff. We need to be expanding our own faith. We need to be growing our own understanding of who Jesus is. We've been talking about that with Philippians, haven't we? Oh, we have. Yeah, you should watch the video. Yes. So we've been thinking, and particularly with the kids, that we need to keep learning about Jesus. We need to keep exploring. Did I use my example with you guys the other day? I'm going to use this example again. If I've used it, this is the last thing I'll probably say, so you can just switch off. But I was preaching the other week, and that sense of, at the moment, how do we learn about Jesus and how do we embed Jesus into our life? An example I used, I'm reading through all my Doctor Who books, which there are numerous of, but it justifies me buying more if I actually read them. If they sit on a shelf, Kylie might go, no, you can't have any more. So I'm reading through them up to the 6th Doctor, so Colin Baker's Doctor, after 3-4 years of reading. So we're doing all right. But to help me, because it's nice when you read to have the voice of the character in your head. So as I'm reading Colin Baker books, I'm listening to the Colin Baker audios adventures that Big Finish puts out regularly, and try to get the right companion with it so that you've got their voices in your head and you can enjoy the story more when it's those voices. That's what we need to do with Jesus, where we are so embedding ourselves with Jesus, where we're reading the Gospels regularly, as well as the rest of the Bible. Just stick with the Gospels, read the whole Bible. But we're getting into the Bible so much, a bit like David Fender's chocolate. We're always getting into it, so it just becomes natural to us. It's that voice that we share. So that's what we need to do, build our own worship so that we can help our young people to worship. That's enough for me for this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. If you've got questions, pop it in the chat and we'll check during the week. We'll come back to things. It's great to hear you and see some of you tuning in regularly. Thank you for that. If this is your first time, welcome. Hope it's helpful for you. But until next week, or until I see you around somewhere, have a good one, and I'll catch you later.